happy to have Maria Anderson and Tina, I don't know your last name. Tina White. You're AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. Okay. So I was reading the Rotarian and came across this article about Elk Run Farm and reached out and invited the two of you to come and speak today. And I'm very proud that you're here. You told me not to read this, so I won't. But I did want to say that this is kind of interesting. At the end of the article, these factoids. 46 million U.S. residents rely on food pantries and meal service programs. 40% of food that is thrown out each year in the U.S. and 1.25 million Washington State residents receive hunger relief. And so that was shocking to me. And so I give you the floor, and you can tell us what you do to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Great. I don't know where it is when I have this. Yeah.
We've got a clicker,
Yeah, clicker.
so as soon as we get a slide roll, it should go. Thanks. Good morning, good morning.
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 Thank you for having us out this morning. I couldn't have asked for a better morning to drive up here. Gorgeous outside. So as Kelly mentioned, my name is Maria Anderson. I'm the farm manager at Elk Run Farm.
And my name is Tina White, and I'm the AmeriCorps Vista place at Elk Run Farms for the year.
So we are going to talk a little bit about Elk Run Farm. This is the project that we work on, and it is a food bank farm for the food banks of South King County.
Yeah, so we grow fresh fruits and vegetables for 12 food banks in South King County, and everything we grow we donate to the food banks in that region. We grow a whole variety of things, about 35 different types of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. So we're still in the beginning stages of the farm, and we're still growing. So this year we plan to increase those numbers as we go along and make different parts of our land in production.
Tina and so this was a golf course.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the little scoop behind that?
So the golf course closed down in 2014 because half of the property that it was on, they decided to build the new Tahoma High School on that property. So the rest of the golf course closed down as well. So we're on 4.5 acres of the remaining golf course that could not be developed into housing.
As you till the soil, do you ever run into golf balls?
Yes.
Do you find anything with my name on it? I left a lot of golf balls.
I
there.
believe you. We found, probably a 5-gallon bucket's worth of golf balls in the course of the work. Most of them have gone away now, but we still have a few relics, and we find them every once in a while, certainly. And keep asking questions as we go, certainly. We like it interactive. So this is a map of the South King County Food Coalition. So we are all of the communities between Seattle and Tacoma, including Vashon Island, and then over to the east to Maple Valley and Enumclaw. So Maple Valley on the east side is sort of our northern border. The food bank here is part of the HopeLink coalition. So we're sort of like HopeLink, although there are 12 food banks, and I think HopeLink has like 5 or 6 that serve the east side. So there are similar organizations like this throughout the county. There's also the Seattle Food Committee that is all of the food banks in Seattle proper. So as I said, the South King County Food Coalition is who started this farm when the offer came to us, snapped it up, and the last 2.5 years approximately have been an effort to turn a golf course into a farm, or back into a farm, because it was a blueberry plantation before it was a golf course.
And then this whole area, collectively, all the food banks are about 10,000 families a month. So that was one of the reasons why the coalition decided to start a farm, because there is such a huge need in our region, or in South King County.
And in the county, South King County is the most in need region. We have the highest rates of food insecurity, highest rates of poverty. It's very ethnically diverse, hundreds of languages spoken coming from all kinds of countries in the world. Tukwila in particular, the high school there is the most diverse in terms of languages spoken in the country. So the region that we're serving is extensive and very, there are different pockets of folks that we're serving throughout South King County.
So
I know,
this
sorry,
is-
it's hard to see.
Yeah. If you can kind of tell, this is what the farm used to look like when it was more of a golf course. You can kind of see like the green here and the golf cart paths. But this is actually our property, or what it used to look like. We lease about 4.5 acres of what used to be this golf course.
Everything inside that sort of thick black line.
See, right around here. Yeah. So these two stars I pulled up are two infrastructure pieces from the golf course that we are still keeping on our lands. This one is the former driving range that we have plans to convert to a greenhouse so we can start our own starts. And this right here is a pavilion that we use for community events, when volunteers have lunch during the summer. It's just a nice, cool, and shady place that we decided to keep. And this green box right here is our main vegetable field. This is what we started off with, and last year we grew about 3,000 pounds of produce on that square. And this blue line is the golf cart path that I mentioned before. The city of Maple Valley is deciding to keep that golf cart path intact. So it's been great because the neighbors around the farm have been using it as a walking trail, and it's been really cool to have that interaction with the people that live around us, and for people to see the farm and have that infrastructure in place so that we can have a better connection with our community. And new this year is this new growing field that was installed from some construction that was going on just north of us here in this parking lot. But they put down some soil in that area, so we have essentially doubled our growing space going forward. So we're really excited to get that into production, and we have a lot of exciting plans to turn it into more permanent beds to grow vegetables, and also to plant a food forest.
Have
around
any of you heard of the
that
food
area.
forest or visited the Beacon Food Forest in Seattle? So a food forest is sort of like an orchard, but rather than just having one kind of thing growing, you have a fruit tree or a nut tree that's surrounded by shrubs and bushes that also grow fruit. So like you could have raspberries, a hazelnut, an apple tree, and then a vine, like you could have a grapevine growing in with that too, and then vegetables and flowers sort of growing around the base. So you like stack functions in the same space. It makes it more like a little ecosystem rather than a really like manicured orchard that you might think of as an orchard. So we are community and volunteer driven on the farm. There are a couple of us that are paid staff, and mostly what we do is recruit and manage volunteers on the farm. Almost all of the farm work that actually happens is done by community members. And this is a slide about our garlic that we grow. The first fall that we broke ground, we didn't have water yet, we didn't have any irrigation. But we got a tractor to come in and break ground for us. And the very first thing we planted was garlic, because garlic is something in the Pacific Northwest that you plant in October, and it grows slowly throughout the winter, and then grows more quickly in the spring, and you harvest it in July. So garlic, as long as you have a typical Pacific Northwest winter and spring, is something you can grow without irrigation, which is what we did. So the very first thing we ever planted was garlic. The first thing we ever harvested was garlic. And though we have irrigation and have expanded, as Tina said, to about 35 different crops, garlic is still sort of the social and emotional centerpiece of the farm for us. So we always have a big volunteer day in the fall to plant all the garlic. And then the garlic harvest in July, we time to have an anniversary party where we just invite all of our volunteers and our friends and our families and people in the community. We have a big party on the farm and we harvest all the garlic, tie it up in bundles and hang it from the rafters in the pavilion. And it cures in the rafters for a couple months and then we take it down and donate it to the food bank. One of the other reasons that we decided to grow garlic, in addition to the fact that it is plantable in that sort of off-season, is that garlic is used almost universally in the world in cooking. Everybody likes it, everybody knows what it is, and because it's so shelf-stable and most of the produce that comes into the food bank comes in as grocery rescue, what can't be sold anymore at the grocery store, garlic almost never makes its way into the food bank. So everybody wants it and nobody gets it. So it's something that we have devoted 1/8 of our field to growing every year. We grow 15 beds of garlic every year. Because we know how important it is, both to the sort of culture of the farm and to the folks that receive it. Yeah.
Keeps away vampires too, right?
It does. There are no vampires on the farm.
So you guys said that you lease the property from the city of Maple Valley?
So we actually lease it from the golf course owners who still own the property,
okay.
but in a year or so, the property is gonna change hands and will go to the Parks Department
Oh, okay.
of the city of Maple Valley. So we work with sort of the owners and sort of looking into the future as to what that will look like with the city.
They can't make it into a community garden?
Well, the city would be our landlords at that point, so, when it changes hands, we've started having very preliminary discussions about what the rest of the golf course could look like. Yeah, so we'll see what comes of that. I think it's gonna be really exciting and innovative, so stay tuned.
And so these are just some shots of the many volunteers that visit our farm. And as Maria said, we are definitely volunteer powered.
How many?
Well, last year we saw about 780 volunteers come to the farm, and that ranges from like Girl Scouts and Cub Scouts and Eagle Scouts to like corporate groups, church groups, and some school groups as well. So anyone and everyone that wants to help out at the farm, we definitely welcome them.
Primarily from that geographic area that you had up there earlier?
Mm-hmm. And most of them are even like closer. It's like Maple Valley, Auburn, Kent. That we don't get as much from the west side, at least not very often. Although we routinely have people coming in from Seattle for the weekend because they've heard about the farm and they want to check it out. They're not our regular volunteers, but we've had people from almost all over the county come to the farm and volunteer.
And what's the day like for a volunteer?
That's a good, hard to answer question. So we have, now that it is the growing season, we have standing volunteer hours on Saturdays. So we're there from 10 to 2, people can drop in, they don't have to sign up, they can just come and we're looking to work. Farming is very changeable and variable throughout the season, so there is no like one size fits all, this is what volunteering looks like. It's whatever tasks we happen to be working on that day. On Saturday we had brassica planting, so we planted a bunch of broccoli, kale, cabbage, cauliflower, that sort of family of plants. So we had to do bed preparation, bring in compost, plant all of those things out, run irrigation lines. So it was actually planting a crop. Sometimes we're digging new beds. We're going to be doing that a lot on that new field. We don't have a tractor. Everything that we do is human scale and human powered. So we dig permanent beds, and once a bed is dug, we have a permanent pathway that we always walk on and a permanent bed that we always plant into. So it's a lot of work up front, but not very much work moving forward. We don't have to go in and till every year or a couple times a year to be able to make our planting beds. So sometimes it's that. Later in the season, it's a lot of harvesting. At least half to 3/4 of our time is just spent picking stuff to go to the food bank, particularly like peas and green beans, which just take so long to hand pick. So you get a taste of everything.
So the broccoli and kale and that kind of stuff, are you planting seeds or starts?
We're planting starts,
Okay.
and we'll get into how we start our seeds because that's through a partnership that we have.
You use winter sowing?
Winter sowing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we grew through the winter. We had about 1/4 of an acre.
Good, I need to talk to you because my jugs are ready to be.
So we start seeds in July, June, July, and August to get ready to go into the ground so that they grow over the winter, and then we can harvest them in early spring. We're currently harvesting a bunch of cauliflower and sending it that overwintered. So one of the reasons that we originally connected with Rotary clubs is not just because y'all do such great work in your communities, but because we also work really, really closely with Rotary First Harvest. So Tina is an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer, and she's the 3rd of 3 that we have had that have been sponsored by Rotary First Harvest. We've also been working with the AmeriCorps NCCC, which is a more short-term team. So Tina's with us for a whole year. The NCCC team is with us for 2 to 3 weeks full-time, and they generally work on infrastructure projects. All these pictures here are from when we've had NCCC teams come
What is
in the past.
NCCC?
The National Civilian Community Corps is what it stands for. It is sort of an outgrowth of the Conservation Corps from the 70s that built the national parks. It's that same program. So young folks age 18 to 24 sign up. They give 10 months and they travel to different host sites throughout the United States over that time, doing whatever the host site needs. So in our case, they're helping us farm and build farm infrastructure, but they could also be trail building, they could be building houses, they could be doing restoration from natural disasters, and at any time they can be called away from a site to respond to a natural disaster as well if we have one. The team that we had last year had just finished up evacuating folks from the Southern California wildfires last summer. So they had just done that and got to come sort of rest on the farm. So that's an amazing resource for us because they generally are skilled. A lot of them have certifications with chainsaws, and they come with all their equipment that they need, and a very high level committed group of folks that can come help us, say, build a greenhouse or put up other structures that we need on the farm. And this summer we're having our very first summer associate who's going to be with us for 10 weeks, sort of a short-term vista working on the farm.
Irrigation can be expensive. Do you have a well on site? Okay.
Yeah.
So you just pay for power?
Yeah, if we had to pay for city water, it would not pencil out. Anything over about 1/4 of an acre doesn't make sense to irrigate when you have to pay for water.
So another way that the Rotary clubs have been helping us out is through supporting our infrastructure. So in the beginning, the first years of the farm, Maria and the former Vista at the time went to all 12 Rotary clubs in the south end of District 5030, and 11 of them decided to pull money for farm infrastructure. So that includes our irrigation that Mindy, our field manager here, is putting together. That also includes a hoop house that serves as sort of like a classroom where people can come in if it's raining outside, and we can still teach people about farming, and also where we grow things during the winter seasons when it's a little bit too cold for lettuce and things like that. And here's the NCCC building, the washing and packing station, where we do post-handling of the harvest that we brought in. So that includes washing off all the dirt, bunching up all the kale to send off to the food bank, so that it's easy for them to put the vegetables on the line and distribute out to people.
Yeah.
How are the safety requirements?
Safety requirements are almost non-existent for us because we're not selling anything. Safety requirements sort of scale up with the amount that you're selling. But both I and our field manager, Mindy, trained on organic market farms. So we use the same sort of standards of production that we used on those farms. In much the same way, we're not organic certified, but we both trained on organic farms and we use all organic practices on the farm. So it's sort of the best of both worlds where we're doing the right thing, but we don't have to jump through all of the hoops that you have to do if you're selling produce.
So there's no reporting requirements?
Nope. There's not.
But all of these infrastructure pieces has been like key to making the farm into the scale that it is, and to grow as much produce as we can. And yeah, we're just really grateful for the Rotary clubs and the support that they've shown us over the years.
Yeah, I always say that the difference between a garden and a farm is the infrastructure. Both of them are growing food, but what happens before and after that food is grown is what makes it a farm. So one of the things that we do in addition to growing food is that we are very passionate about stewarding the land that we've been given. Part of that, as I mentioned, is using organic practices, which allows a lot of different animals and creatures to coexist with us on the farm in a pretty harmonious way. We have mason bees. The middle picture are mason bees, which are native bees. So we have a volunteer, and her daughter did her bronze award for Girl Scouts and installed some mason bees for us. And that same volunteer helps keep the mason bees, and she and her friend keep 3 honeybee hives on the farm as well.
Do you work with birds and bees?
She trained with them,
Okay.
so
I'm trying to
indirectly.
get them to come
Yeah, indirectly we do. So we are doing that. We do worm composting on the farm. The picture on this side, it's kind of hard to see, is a ground nest that we found last summer on the edge of the farm of dark-eyed junco birds, baby birds, that we sort of cordoned off and made sure people didn't step on them. We got to watch them from egg to fledgling. And so making sure that it's a healthy place for wildlife to live means that the food that we're growing is healthy for people. Because the toxins and poisons that you use to control insects and other animals make it so the food is less safe for people to consume as well. So every time we find a new sort of animal living on the farm or spot something, we consider it to be like a win. We've done our job because it's a better place for them.
The reason it used to be, or the reason it was Elk Run is because there used to be quite a few elk that used to go through there. Elk can be very damaging to crops. How do you control that?
We have a fence.
Okay, so you pull one of those 8-foot elk fences up?
Well, we didn't because so part of the reason that we are where we are is because we're underneath high voltage power lines. So we couldn't put anything higher than 6 feet. Obviously a 6-foot fence is not keeping an elk out,
No.
let alone a deer. So what we did, is there a picture of this? I'm not sure if there's a picture, there might be. We have a double layer fence. So we have 2 6-foot fences that are 5 feet apart.
They won't jump.
So they're too close, they're too far apart for them to jump both. And since we put it up, we haven't had deer or elk damage.
No, that's what I did. It works well.
So we do have a fence on the farm. People seem to think that it's to keep people out, that we like lock it up and keep people out, but it's really not. It's just so that the deer and elk don't eat all of our vegetables.
No locks.
Yeah.
Just kids. Along with growing food and making sure that the land stays resilient, we also do a lot of educational programming with schools in the area. So with pre-K to 8th grade students, we do a lot of field trips with them. And these are just some shots of the different field trips that school groups have had. Down here, a middle school group built these raised beds that we put in our children's garden area. And some of the older kids have learned how to safely use power tools, maybe some of the more middle school age kids. so that's been really fun to teach them that trade skill. And we also have some younger kids that helped us learn about pollinators on the farm. They also, what do you call it, winnowing the...
Yeah, they threshed and winnowed some rye that we grew.
Yeah.
So we just threw a bunch of rye out on the concrete slab and they stomped on it, put it in buckets and took it out in the wind and got to see sort of that whole grain process.
Yeah. So it's been really cool to work with these students and to teach them about, you know, how to farm in sustainable methods and where does your food come from, and to let them like question those things as they move forward too.
So my favorite part of my job these days is actually working with 90 high school students that all are in the plant sciences class, with 3 plant sciences classes at the high school. So the golf course closing down was a blessing in disguise for us. Well, not really in disguise. Blessing for us because we got to start a farm, but also because the other half is now a high school, and the Tacoma High School is like the 5th biggest in the state. So there are a lot of students within sight of the farm now. So they moved into that high school this last fall. And we started a relationship with the plant sciences students, and during the growing season, they come out to the farm once a week. And the teacher who is teaching that class built her curriculum essentially for the class around sort of the rhythms of an urban farm. So they started in the fall helping us finish the last of our harvests. Basically every time they were coming out, they were learning how to harvest a new kind of plant. And you asked about seeds versus starts, and all of the starts that we're growing are being started in their greenhouse. So we go over to the school, we teach them how to start the starts, how to take care of them, and they sort of manage that. And then they get to bring them over to the farm and plant them out. And this is the beginning of what we envision will be a very long-term partnership with these classes. So the beauty of the class is that they're on a block schedule, so they have more than an hour that they can spend in the school day. And it's close enough that they can walk over. We're not like a field trip, it's just part of their class. And it's a year-long class, so we've been working with the same 90 students since the first day of school all the way through the end of school. So we are starting to form relationships with these 90 students. And this summer we're going to be doing our first high school intern program. So we're going to be pulling some of these students to have a paid internship on the farm for about 10 weeks this summer.
So along with the programming on the farm, we also do some programming in the food banks themselves. Last summer, we piloted a free farm stand at food banks where we bring the produce and all the equipment that you would normally see like a farmer's market vendor set up with, and we set up at the food bank and distribute the produce themselves. So it's sort of like a mock farmer's market stand. And that's been really great to meet the people that we're growing the food for and to talk to them and see what they like, what they don't like, how are they going to prepare the produce that we're giving them, and just to start building those relationships with the people that we grow with.
That they like and don't like, and how are they
Well, last summer we learned that people aren't interested in yellow summer squash. They're more interested in just green zucchinis, even though they're basically the same vegetable. You prepare them the same way, they taste pretty similar, but they're just really into that more like traditional like zucchini looking vegetable. So they gravitate towards that. And so now going into this growing season, we're just gonna focus on green zucchinis. And so people
Do a little bit of the other fun stuff.
Yeah. And we also had, we also grow tomatillos, so we've asked like people how to, or I've asked how to do that since I don't really cook with tomatillos, and it's been like great to hear from people like what you do with that vegetable, because other than like salsa verde, I'm pretty clueless to how to use it. So it's been also a learning experience for me too.
So have you looked at making partnerships with like some sort of culinary aspect that can do like tutorials and like, hey, this is how this stuff can be prepared, or to create recipes for the specific vegetables that thrive in the area?
Yeah. Yeah, so actually we work with Wazoo Extension's SNAP Ed program, and we are currently training food bank volunteers and staff on how to do cooking demonstrations with either like some unfamiliar produce that we grow or just staples that you find at food banks. So we currently don't have the capacity to do the cooking demonstrations ourselves, so that's why we're providing this training, so that maybe someone that is volunteering or working at the food bank can take that on as their project. And we also printed out some recipes, like nothing too restrictive, just like how to prepare certain types of produce, and we're gonna distribute that to the 12 food banks that we work with too. So we definitely try to make sure that people know how to prepare the vegetables that they get.
Do you ever work with organizations like Fair Start? Familiar with Fair Start? Yeah. Is there any opportunity for a relationship there?
I think that there is definitely opportunity moving forward. All of our partnerships are restricted by the amount of time that we have to have those partnerships.
Okay.
So a lot of the partnerships we have already are people that came to us early on and said, let's work in this way. And so until we have more capacity, we just don't have a lot of time or mental bandwidth to start a bunch more relationships. But one of the partners that we do have is Highline College, the community college in Des Moines, and they have a Fair Start program. And so we're always looking at ways that we can keep plugging in with our partners in a deeper way. And if there are other people that have great ideas, we always want to hear about ways that we can be partnering with new people. It's just, limited amount of time and resources. So as I mentioned before, we now have volunteer work parties every Saturday. We are on Facebook and Instagram both, so if you're on either of those platforms, I encourage you to like or follow us. And starting this summer, the first Saturday of every month, we're going to have a new volunteer orientation that starts a little earlier. So instead of the 10 o'clock start time, we start at 9. And that includes sort of the history of the farm, a farm tour, an explanation of the kinds of things you would do as a volunteer. Some people are totally comfortable just dropping in for the first time and sort of jumping in, but other people really want that sort of background information before they really get themselves involved. One of the things I do love about our volunteer work parties is that we have no age restrictions. You can bring the tiniest children that you have onto the farm. And we've heard from multiple families in Maple Valley that we're one of the only places that you can volunteer as a whole family. So my 4-year-old niece has been coming to the farm every Saturday with me since she was 2. And we are very good at providing meaningful work for small children on the farm. And being able to bring in families to learn about food and talk about food together is one of the, I think, best things that we do on the farm.
We also have a quick plug of a crowdfunding campaign that we're running at the moment. So we had a private donor approach us and say that after hearing a lot of our infrastructure plans for this year, decided to put in a $20,000 match until this June. And so he challenged us to raise that money so that we can receive his match. So if we are planning to get some of the last pieces of our infrastructure figured out this year, so that includes putting in electricity, and I mentioned a little bit about the construction a while ago in the slides, but that also led to us moving our well, so we also have to reinstall a new well, so we're also trying to raise money for that, along with a walk-in cooler, so that we can keep harvest or vegetables that we just harvest sort of safe and shelf stable on the farm, instead of trying to find a food bank that's open right then and there just to give us a little bit of that leeway. So those are some of the things that we would like to raise some money for. So if you like what you heard today, please consider donating and definitely share this fundraiser with our friends. It's on our Facebook, which is Elk Run Farm.
And we can send you a follow-up link too as an email that you can share.
Yeah.
And anybody who donates $50 or more gets a jar of our first harvest of honey from our honeybees last year. So a numbered jar of honey. There are only 50, first come, first served. So.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. So you're talking about just food storage for shelf life and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is the water table low enough or deep enough, I should say, that a cellar is an option?
No.
It's like right at the surface.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's a little, yeah, no. I think our most viable option is a walk-in cooler. It's really difficult. I don't even envy people that have basements in the Pacific Northwest, just dealing with, like, it's crazy. I come from eastern Montana, and you can dig as deep as you want. You're never gonna hit water. So this is like, there's so much water, I love it. But I wouldn't want a basement. So sort of same with a cellar.
How do you talk for a minute about the logistics of harvest to food bank?
So great question. We do harvests a few times a week in the summertime, and now because we don't have a walk-in cooler, we harvest so we have crates that are about this big, and we harvest between 10 and 15 on an average sort of day of various kinds of vegetables, whatever's ready. And then we staff drive them in our cars to a food bank to donate that day. We have a schedule of knowing who's open and who can receive produce at any given time. And we try to spread it out between all 12 food banks. At the end of the season last year, we had so much produce that we had to take one harvest and split it between like 3 cars, go to 3 different food banks, and drop them off because they can't take too much produce at once because the food banks themselves have limited sort of walk-in cooler storage too. So that's the current model. I think that we're going to be producing enough this year that is going to quickly become obsolete. The coalition does have a big, like, 30-foot box truck that makes the rounds throughout the region. So I think we're going to try to figure out how to hook up with that and get the produce delivered for us in some ways. But the logistics of plugging in the farm to sort of the existing delivery schedules that's going to be our challenge for this year, is that growing pains. And hopefully finding some volunteers, much like food banks have volunteers to go run and do deliveries and pickups for them, that we can find farm volunteers that are interested in taking deliveries to food banks as well. Yeah.
So I lived in Elk Run for 5 years, and my first Rotary magazine that I read, this was the first article, and I was like, what? I was like, I love the idea, but I kind of think like an entrepreneur. So I was thinking, if you guys grew part of your crop was marijuana,
This is not the first time we've heard that. No, go.
that could fund everything. But taking out the social stigma, or
Right, yeah. So part of the complication of farming marijuana is that there are a very limited number of growers that they're allowing to do that. And the hoops that you have to, if you think food safety hoops are tough, marijuana growing hoops, it is outside of the realm of possibility.
It's going to be city property next to a high school.
Yeah,
So,
there's that
perfect.
too. They would,
Lots of
even
clients.
if they wanted to, yeah, they would not.
Jonas,
they
you
would
can give
not
me your
give us a
license if
permit.
you want. Yeah.
Well-
But I mean, marijuana is basically the only crop grown in Washington that pays for itself on a square footage basis. That is competitive.
I just got back from OMAC this last weekend to see my kids. Apparently, Okanagan County is the biggest grower in the country now of marijuana, and they have these gigantic airplane kind of hangars. Like, I'm talking huge complexes. Meanwhile, as you drive down 97, you'll see field after field after field that's fenced, razor wired, with the lights and with the cameras, and nothing growing. And apparently what's happening is the mega companies have now driven out the small guy, And the rule is you have to have a place that it can be marketed or you can't grow. So the little guys started out with that connection, but the big guys have just reduced the price and they're running all the small people out of business.
I mean, it's
So you
the
see
same
hundreds
for
of these
vegetables.
farms that
It's
started
just
and
new.
nothing's going on now.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is the big corporations and the big money
Yeah.
is what
And
is
it's
driving.
very expensive to get yourself set up, even if you can get the permit.
Well, and you would not have a place to market it, so
Yeah,
you
I
couldn't
mean-
go because the big guys have now secured all that.
Yeah. So that, I mean, it's a valid thing that we had discussions about. But sort of the spirit of the farm and the community aspect
Sure.
of the farm
How about
precludes
hops?
that, as well as just the
We need
sheer
hops.
complication of trying to do something like
But
that.
I just want to say, I mean, this is really a great idea, and what a great use of something that golf course sucked. And,
Oh, Jonah, the real.
I don't golf, so
So there's no municipality or King County that is contributing to this need. There's no other federal or state money coming in.
So funding is always complicated. The county, the Department of Natural Resources and Parks is incredibly supportive of what we're doing. They're constantly trying to connect us with funding. They provide letters of support, et cetera, et cetera. The city of Maple Valley has been very supportive, not with funds, but they have waived a bunch of permits and basically approved all of our plans, letting us do what we want to do on the property. So we have support in that context. It has not really translated at that level to money, although the initial funding to start the farm and pay staff and get things going came through public health King County from the CDC grant for healthy communities. And a lot of what we do, particularly in the wintertime, is seek funding. So we write grants. We constantly write grants, especially in the wintertime, and are actively fundraising all of the time from all kinds of different places, because we're not just growing food for food banks. We're doing education, we're doing community building, we're doing nutrition education, so there are lots of different pots of money that we can pull from, but grant writing is a bit of a crapshoot, and you get some of them and you don't get others. So.
All right, you guys have any questions? I want to thank you guys, this is awesome.
Yeah.